My name is Kyle Jennings. I'm the Senior Director of Supply Chain here at CBA. I'm responsible for everything from demand planning through distribution. We forecast a number of ways, but basic forecasting is done at the SKU level, and then we forecast that down to the wholesaler level. So our end customer is a wholesaler. We use MAPE, which is a moving average, and we use our forecast accuracy looking 1 month forward. So we're in March now. So whatever the forecast was actually in May, how good were we at that? And normally we're running about 85, 86%. The way that our systems work, we have an integrated suite of systems with a tool called Agility. So we have a demand plan. We have inventory management in the same tool. And the other module for that is manufacturing planning. And we've gone to each of our breweries and put in all of our capacities. So for every fermenter, we have that capacity. For the production line, we have that capacity. So for all of the major steps in the brewing and packaging process, we know what we can do and how long it takes. So what my manufacturing planner does, he takes all of that input of what we need and plays that into the tool, and it actually lays out what we need in each week to meet that demand. So what we do with each seasonal is we look at its prior year's history and use the same demand curve. So we start heavy. We'll usually start with up to 50% of making that beer and sending it out. So the curve is very front end heavy, so it dies out near the end of the season. So what we try to do is get with the sales group, get some market intelligence ahead of time to say, do we think this is really going to blow the doors off? Or is it going to be one of those, maybe a sleeper? But we tend to do the same thing as we do with rotators, as look at something similar that came out in that similar time period and build a demand curve on that. We get ahead of the brewing, so as we get closer to the brew time, we try to narrow down very precisely what we're going to use. And with rotator, it may be what we call one and done. So it may be a one-time brew. For seasonals or things that are in the market longer, we'll brew multiple times. It's a little bit of an art and a science because sometimes we miss. For our core, what we call core brands, so Hefeweizen, Longhammer, Longboard, those are fairly consistent. However, where we see changes is if we go to a new geography, that can have a fairly distinctive demand change. Trends change, and right now the trend is changing from half barrels to 6 barrels. It's also changing from draft more to package or glass. So we do keep an eye on that to say, well, okay, we need to have less draft, more package, more 6 barrels, less half barrels. When Widmer Brothers and Red Hook merged in 2008, we were already making some of the Red Hook brands. We have been producing Kona here for since the late 90s. So that wasn't a major change. The biggest change for us was Omission. So Omission is a gluten-free beer. And what it takes is a different process than some of the other ones. It's only made here currently. So that process makes us have to change our other schedules to facilitate that. So that's the only one that really had a big impact. The other ones, much of them use the same yeast. They use a lot of the same hops. So from a brewing perspective, it's not too much different. The other difference is on the packaging side, those now have different size bottles. So that requires changeovers. So we have to build all that in. We've done that through the manufacturing plan. From an operations side, we like to have one bottle, same size all the time. But from a marketing standpoint, they would like something different. So it creates a bit of a challenge for us, but it's workable. Running capacity, number-wise, in a given year is probably 12 million barrels. We're at about 10 from year to year right now. As far as inventory goes, we really have to have inventory. When we started this project, we had none. The breweries were not built for any. So in the past 2 years, we've actually put inventory into third-party warehouses. Because what we found is no matter how good your demand system is and your planning is, you're going to see fluctuations. If we were only shipping to one place or two places, we could probably do that. But we shipped over 500 locations. You know, if you aggregate your demand up, it's quite smooth. We found that to be able to service them at the rate we want to service them, we have to carry, 8 to 10 days worth of inventory here to absorb any of that fluctuation day to day. Well, expansion, unfortunately, most of our breweries don't have any capacity to build left. The way we would generally expand is probably through contract brewing. We just added about 20% capacity to this brewery. That's going to hold us in pretty good stance at least for a couple of years. We don't feel like at least in the next 2 years we have to worry too much about that. We have occasionally bottlenecks, mainly in our fermentation tanks, especially when we have times when we're not packaging full out. Everything tends to get backed up. That's really the only time we ever have any real capacity issues. All of our bottling lines can more than keep up with, what we throw at them. We now have 4 different 12-ounce bottle sizes. So each of those requires some amount of changeover, anywhere from 40 minutes to an hour and a half. And it goes by brand. So Widmer has one size bottle, Kona has a different one, and then we also do 22-ounce bottles, which requires a different changeover, and we only try to run those once every 2 to 3 weeks. What happens is the bottles run down a rail, and they have sides on them. So those rails all the rails have to be widened or narrowed as you change bottles. And then we also have our glass coming in the same boxes that it goes out in. So our glass supplier sends us glass in a 12-pack or 24-pack, and we have a machine that pulls the bottles out of that box and then puts it back in once it's filled. Well, if you have a different height bottle, that means those machines that take the bottles out and put them back in all have to be readjusted per the bottle size. So we purchase kegs generally once a year. They have a shelf life of 10 years or so. So it's not, that we have to replace them that often. So we're having to buy them more for growth than we do for replacement. Our keg floats, we operate a little bit differently from one coast to the other. So in the West Coast, we own some kegs. We lease some kegs. We also, for our own kegs, we go around and we keep track as close as we can of those. There's no systematic way to do that, so it's a little happenstance. Really, our float in the East, we own all of our kegs in the East. Because we go so many different, very small locations who may only have 5 to 10, it's just not conducive for us to do it. So there's a company that actually aggregates kegs, and they'll go pick them up, and then they'll send us their trucks, as often as they need to. Again, there's a fee for that. You pay for that, but it's cheaper than us paying the freight to do it. The robotic arms that we have here are unique to this brewery for CBA. They were put in 5 or 6 years ago. So there's one arm that takes the kegs off the pallet and one arm that puts them back. So there's no manual labor whatsoever. Our other breweries are almost all manual. So empty kegs come in, people have to actually lift them off of that pallet, put them on the keg line, and then they have to basically roll them off at the end of the line to put them onto a pallet. So from an efficiency standpoint, one, we can run them faster here and runs them through and can palletize much faster than a man can. It can be programmed for multiple size kegs. From a timing standpoint, labor standpoint, instead of having 2 to 3 people running a line, you have half of a person or maybe a full person.